Hello and welcome back to episode 9 of the C-Suite Cyber Podcast. The C-Suite Cyber Podcast enables C-Suite executives to make security-informed decisions. What's going on, Mike?
Yeah, we got another guest today. This is someone from your side, and we'll introduce him in a bit. We'll knock out the beginning stuff. We'll do an intro for ourselves. We'll talk about any updates, and then we'll dive right into the podcast. Yeah, that's what's going on. What have you been working on since the last episode?
You know, there's been a whole lot. There's this interesting, someone called it Google spoofing. It's not really spoofing. It's coming from Google, but using Google Maps or Google Drawings or Classroom to basically send links into people for them to click on, which takes them to a fake CAPTCHA. And then the CAPTCHA has a link embedded. So when they click on that, they get redirected to a crypto page or something. It's not a very good attack, if we're being honest, because how many people actually have forgotten crypto accounts that they want to log into? But it could be used, obviously, to phish credentials if they put up a fake O365 or a Google, says it's coming from Google. So there's potential, but the stuff I've seen, it's just not too great, man. What have you been up to?
Nothing cool. Really just been working on our stuff, working on getting social media stuff up, YouTube videos, figuring out the live stream schedule. Other than that, nothing fun except for the snow here in Charleston. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Snowy Beach. Saw Pensacola got snow too.
Really? All the way down that far?
And New Orleans. New Orleans got a lot, I think.
Did y'all get any over in Tennessee?
Yeah.
Like how many inches? They said we got 9.
I think we got, well, not that much.
Really? I figured y'all would get more than us.
No. Yeah, 5'4".
Yeah, so not much.
He's on a mountain, so he gets more than I do down here.
Yeah, you get to slide down that mountain.
Why is that?
Like a slide.
Why is that funny?
It's funny because I just imagine just trying to get down off the mountain to go to work and just sliding around the corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good time. Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So not a crazy ton of updates. Oh, I was going to ask you, who was the group doing that technique? Because I saw it in the news and it looked familiar. Who was it? Do you remember?
I don't know. From what I've seen, it's kind of just a spray and pray attack. I don't know. Maybe there's someone who's like I said, using it to its full potential and phishing creds or something else. But the stuff that I've seen, it doesn't really matter. It even, instead of blind copying people, they just have a bunch of addresses in the CC instead of the blind copy. So it's just like, they're lazy. That's what it is.
So let's dive into our intros, man. Go ahead. Introduce me today. What do you got?
I feel like I used all the good stuff last week. All right. He is an adventurous single man for you ladies out there who runs a business, runs his legs, and occasionally runs his mouth. He is Mike Small.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, we've been doing introducing ourselves just for fun, like each other. It's hilarious. All right, let's see. The man, the myth, the model, the legend, Anthony, however you say his last name, also known as AJ.
Yeah.
The podcast host. Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. Like everyone messes his name up, just like mine though. Like I get all kind of variations of my name. Mikhail, Michelle, who knows? All right, so introduce our guest. Who do we have?
So this here is a friend, a former colleague, former boss, business owner, father, husband, all the good jazz, Mr. Tyler York. We worked together in the Air Force way back when. It's when we actually met. And fun story about that, he was a rope, which for those of you who haven't been through like tech school, a rope is like an authority figure because he's older than us. And so he used to boss us around, and a lot of us actually didn't like Tyler in tech school. And then we went to Germany together and we are like, okay, you're not so bad. Like, so we became friends with Tyler once we got into Germany.
Is he just too bossy?
Yeah, it's just arrogant,
Yeah, he really introduced you well on that one, the arrogant Tyler.
Not anymore. We all grow up. We all mature.
Yeah, that's
I don't even remember those days.
Yeah, this is Tyler York, owner of WYRE Technology here in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And we'll get into a little bit about what WYRE does, what Tyler does, and should be a great episode.
That'd be fun. So we actually had some requests about questions about cybersecurity and how like people look at it from the IT perspective, like that around managed servers. So definitely going to ask some of those questions and pick your brain about that. It'll be definitely be fun.
Cool. Excited.
Yeah. Usually when I meet people with your background, they're ready to get rid of me as soon as possible. They're like, oh, this security nerd, get him out of here.
No, we need you.
All
Mike,
right.
you starting questions? Like you tossed me into the deep end with your dad, or what?
Oh, I can. I was going to let you ask your questions, and I was going to go in on my questions. No, okay.
Okay, we can do that.
But yeah, ask yours, and I'll dive in mine. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess first off, we should probably explain, Tyler, what managed service provider is, and then kind of an overview of said services that you provide.
Sure. So WYRE is an MSP primarily, which means that we do IT as a managed service. Usually that's kind of IT as a whole, kind of outsourced IT from support all the way up to managed cybersecurity and managed strategy, CIO as a service, things like that. In other cases, sometimes we just do a fraction. Sometimes it's managed infrastructure, just servers. Sometimes it's managed network. It just depends on what the client's needs are. And we work side by side with internal IT teams or internal IT leaders. And either we're the hands, we're out there in the field supporting users and remotely supporting users. And other times we're kind of specialists going in and sniping problems. So that's most of the business, say 80%. And then 20% is professional services, doing implementation, server refresh, network designs, things like that.
So you guys do like email, endpoint, network, like what are all the different layers that you touch? And I know you've also had some interesting projects like mining and stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, so layers, definitely the most important for us is service. So that's the user. So we're mostly a service company. That's what we say. And so we're taking care of the people who use technology at the companies to do whatever it is that is their mission, and whatever it takes to, to make sure they're taken care of and safe. And cybersecurity is definitely a component of that. So the endpoint, the user, the email security tools, and Microsoft 365 or Google licensing, and the configuration of those tenants, the network, the Wi-Fi, the firewalls, anything that they use to connect to internal or external networks, server infrastructure, both on-prem, hybrid cloud, whatever their configuration is. In some ways, the SaaS applications, especially if it is integrated with their identity management, then we support sort of that component of it. We're not experts in every ERP software or every accounting software or HR, whatever. That's their business. But making sure they get into it and that they're doing that in a secure way is where we touch the application layer. And then, beyond that, it's strategy as well.
What do you think is, I guess, like the most common package that your customers ask for?
Most are full. Most are fully managed. And so that's going to be everything I just said, just all rolled up into, here's Jesus, take the wheel. You guys do everything, right? And they trust us to run their business from an IT perspective and advise them on if they need hardware refreshes or they need to invest in cybersecurity or if they need a pen test or if they have a compliance need that we're going to either do it internally or find a partner to manage that for them. So that's most common is going to be full. And what you see there is from your startup and small business up to even maybe over 150 employees, 200 employees. That's kind of where you see that. And then usually larger than that, they're going to have some internal team or a fraction of somebody who has opinions, and they're going to want more of an implementation from us than just everything.
So a question about that. So when you say full, how do you determine what they need? Is it you have regular meetings with them to say, hey, is this working the way you want it to work? What kind of like upgrades do you want coming up? How does that look with the interaction?
So initially, regardless of what the customer's industry is, we have to go in and kind of learn what they're doing today, what they really need to be doing, and kind of where they at. Where's the gap there? And we'll take them where they are. We're not going to come in and say, hey, listen, day one, you've got to switch to our preferred vendors, our preferred software. If they've already paid up a year of, EDR or whatever it is, we'll kind of take it how it is and then do the best we can with that, as long as it's a supported stack, right? Like if they have outdated equipment that's not getting firmware updates, a firewall that's not supported anymore, something like that, or Windows 7, which is still out there quite a bit, or Exchange on-prem. We'll say, hey, listen, we've got to move in this direction, but we'll take them where they're at.
Nice. Like, so would you say you do reoccur, like you, after like the initial, you figure out what they're doing, you set a roadmap with them with intentions of where you're going, and you just start kind of walking them down that path as your relationship progresses? Wow, I can't talk.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, so in some cases that needs to happen quickly. You know, if you're really behind, you've got servers that are open wide, you know, to the internet, and you've got RDP pass through the firewall or something like that. You know, we need to take care of that day one. If it's something that doesn't require capital expenses or something like that, we'll make those configuration changes immediately. But if it requires a refresh of the whole network across 3 manufacturing facilities, then we've got to kind of phase that in and spread those costs. So we're reasonable. We try to be really reasonable and flexible, and kind of just take care of them as what's their mission. It's not necessarily to be at the cutting edge or to have the newest equipment. It's to make parts. And so as long as they can do that safely, that's what we're trying to head toward.
So would you say, you talked about manufacturing and stuff, and obviously Chattanooga is a big manufacturing area, but what would you say your breakdown is as far as manufacturing, education, maybe just like different schools, churches, etc., if you don't mind?
So industry-wise, manufacturing is really large for us. Nonprofits, Chattanooga is a strangely huge hub for nonprofits, also for the freight industry. So there's a lot of that. So a lot of nonprofits that are larger than you might expect. And then we manage certain portions of a large college. And then project-wise, we actually do work for pretty large publicly traded companies, especially or in the network professional services area. Managed services is probably maybe 25-30% manufacturing, 25-30% nonprofits, 10% education, and then the rest of it is onesie-twosie stuff, you know, like one-offs.
Who would you say is your favorite industry to work with and your least favorite?
Man, that's good. Industries to work with, like manufacturing, I like utility companies. We have a great utility company that we work with, and I think the reason is because they know that they have a very clear goal. I need to get this much volume out. I need to make sure that our customers receive utility services, and that relies on these subsystems, and they absolutely must run. And we've known for 20 years that IT was important, and you guys are just doing it the best, or you've gotten us out of a tight spot, or you've saved us on our operating costs or something. And it's just valuable inherently to them, and you don't have to sell it. You know, we really don't sell it. We just say, if you need IT, if you need cybersecurity, if you need service and you already know that, then we try to be the best option for it. And so that comes natural. So places where that doesn't, industries that are extremely like hourly billing, law firms unfortunately come to mind. Places that are really counting their pennies, and not necessarily because they don't have the financial strength to pay for IT, but because everything is a call center to certain types of businesses, and that's really what they're caring about, and they just see it as an expense on P&L, and they don't want that. So legal is not something that we've cracked the code on how to convey the value of the service. So I think that we'll fix that in the future, but we haven't had a ton of experience in it. But if we've had any challenges, it's been in stuff like that.
There's a managed service company here in Charleston, and they pretty much specialize in law firms. Like that's almost all they work with when they do stuff. I was like, that's interesting because you don't really see that.
And there are and I think that it's probably a scale thing as well, right? So like smaller companies, regardless of industry, are going to be having that same mental calculus, trying to figure out how to rationalize. I know I need IT, but gosh, I don't want it to be so expensive, or, you know, it's a challenge. And so for us, that we don't get the economies of scale in the small businesses that we get in the large. And so it's actually more cost per person per employee at the customer at a smaller level than it is at a larger level. And so we can actually afford to sort of give some scale discounts and be more flexible with larger organizations. And then when you get down to small, where you feel like you really want to be that way, it costs almost as much mental energy to have a customer with a handful of employees as it does to have a customer with 50. Now you have other costs that do scale, and you still have to increase those costs as you find those larger customers. But it's not as linear as you might think. It's heavily weighted at the beginning. Existing as a business at all takes a significant amount of administrative overhead.
Yeah, that's kind of like how the pen testing world is with smaller businesses. It just doesn't scale well at the smaller companies who may want it. And we had to design like a special, more cost effective, much expeditious service for them because of that. Like, well, they need it, but they can't afford it. But we really want to help those people because they're the ones getting beat up with all these different attacks. Is like, how do we solve that problem? And it not cost us money to do that. Yeah,
And that's what it comes down to. Like the loss is real. Like if you don't put enough margin into it, then you end up upside down on a lot of those engagements, even though you really want to do that work and you want to take care of those people. At the end of the day, we have employees to pay as well. And it's a struggle to balance that sometimes because you're more like, gosh, those people really need help. And so what we found is we found some partners that do more break fix hourly work that we don't do. And for places that just need somebody to call when their hair's on fire, so nice to have that in our back pocket and be like, these folks are going to take good care of you.
Yeah, that is awesome. I would say like pen testing, where all the clients who know that they need it, those are our favorite too, because it's hard to convey the need of a pen test when you've never heard of it and don't really think about security. It's like, well, you definitely need these hackers to come in and hack some stuff. Like what? Like why? Isn't that what I want to stop? Well, yeah, but you need them to stop them. You know what I'm saying?
You gotta get ahead of it.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain risk to someone who hasn't felt the pain. Or you have to like project that pain onto them, be like, this is going to hurt really bad. But then you feel like you're selling. And it's like, we kind of have this aversion to trying to persuade someone. It's like, well, if you decide you need this, I'm probably the right person. Like, come see.
Yeah. I hate selling with like FUD. Like that's the word they put there. It makes me feel slimy if I do it. So I don't ever do it. I'm like, well, this is the reason. But like you said, call me if you do find you need it. I'm not going to say, here's all the statistics of people losing money. It's a $40 trillion a year,
Yeah.
If you need it, you need it. Call me. Here for you.
Well, regulation's a double-edged sword, right? Like a lot of our clients that are very cybersecurity aware and value services like your own, and in some ways our services as well, is due to compliance. And some of our customers provide heavily regulated services. They're on their, for themselves. And so they lean on us to get them through that. And that's where annual pen tests, things like that become just a no-brainer. And so sometimes we're not thankful for regulation, but in that way, it is driving the behavior that keeps them safe. So that's good.
How do you feel about working in compliance? I hate it personally, but do you love the act of working through frameworks and making sure they're compliant? Yeah.
Not personally, not as an individual. I don't know that I've met many people that just love going through controls and just being like, absolutely, we're compliant with that. Like, yes. Look at that. Surely those people are out there. And, I've met some people who really love spreadsheets. So I think that maybe those are closely linked, but we get through it. We do what we have to do for each regulatory framework. And then we try to stick to something ourselves as well. And I'm not personally an expert in compliance, but we have those folks on staff. And then we also partner with a couple outside companies that either consult with us to help us implement these frameworks, or they take control or accountability for certain parts of the infrastructure and ensure compliance, like what we would have called back in the day, a golden image or something like that for workstations that's certified to be compliant with X regulation. So we kind of partner with people who are experts in each thing. We know what we're not good at, or at least we try very hard to know what we're not good at. And that's why we partner with folks like Tandem.
I mean, that's the best approach to do. We used to do some other stuff and we cut it out. We're like, no, and we've had people ask us if we do certain things. We're like, no, we love to hack. One, we're good at hacking. That's all we want to do. We don't want to be in the compliance world unless we're like one of those pieces of compliance. We don't want to run the framework business and that, 100-page checklist. That's not us. It was horrible. I hated it too. I got so spun up on HIPAA compliance and then the Insurance Data Security Act here. I was just like, I'm miserable when I am studying this to make sure we're doing it right. Screw this. Let's just drop it. Like, I don't want to do
Stuff.
it.
Yeah. It's not an opportunity.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to learn it, anybody listening that is like, what's the most lucrative thing I could learn? I think that'll high on that list. Seriously, getting out there and helping companies become CMMC compliant or any sort of high touch framework that is affecting a high margin industry. That means that industry is going to have the money to implement that framework, and it's going to be extremely high incentive and low friction sales. So, I see that, and it's a huge opportunity, but it's also just a massive challenge. And we're trying and succeeding through partnerships, but we'd love to build a more complete compliance practice internally. So something we're working on.
GRC's the thing. Yeah, go ahead.
Since you mentioned CMMC, you have to explain to the audience what the acronym stands.
All right. I'm going to pull up.
This is exactly what we do. Like, I don't remember what the acronym means.
Yeah.
No, but it's
you take this.
No, I don't know the acronym. I was just going to say it was for government contracts, essentially.
Have y'all looked at any of the executive orders coming out? Do you think it's going to go away with some of those?
I don't know. I don't know yet. I think it's too early to tell.
I think there were I sent both of you guys the same thing. So I think there were some interesting executive orders that came out specifically like impacting the larger agencies. So DHS being one, right? And for those of you who don't know, DHS has a very specific team called HURT, or at least it was back in the day when I interviewed for them. Stands for Hunt and Incident Response. Basically, if a corporation gets compromised, they're the team that goes on site and performs the incident response functions as part of the Department of Homeland Security in order to like collect evidence and all that stuff. Like if you see, and I don't know if they're the ones that are directly like influencing if we place sanctions against certain individuals or whatever. I just know they go to the corporations, do their incident response, and they're aligned to Department of Homeland Security, obviously. So I think stuff like that is interesting. Like I saw the Volt Typhoon or Salt Typhoon, whichever typhoon group it was, allegedly tied to China. Investigation has stopped, which is interesting. So there's some trickle down effects that I think will take a few months for us to actually see. But one thing that was interesting also was the emphasis on offensive security. And I know that's been like a big kind of term that's been thrown back and forth, like hack first or hack forward kind of mentality, instead of like, oh, our corporations continuously get breached by this specific region that says they don't do hacking. Maybe we should like do some forward actions in order to kind of prevent that activity. But I think it'll take a few months before we actually see stuff like that happen, unless it's owned and then they just take down the White House page like they did some other stuff. But again, these opinions are ours and not those of our employers.
Yeah, I just read interesting when I was looking through, I think it was yours, where it looked like they were kind of deprioritizing cybersecurity as a whole and more prioritizing the offensive aspect, like you mentioned. So I was like, that's kind of interesting, but okay. And I thought that may bleed into some of those regulations and compliance efforts that they did have. So I don't know. I guess like Tyler said, we'll see what happens with all that. It'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah. I can't imagine like PCI, like payment card information compliance would go away.
That's not going, that's industry led effort. So it has nothing to do with the government whatsoever.
Yeah. So CMMC would be the only one that's impacted then, right? Like HIPAA would still exist.
HIPAA's government as well.
Really?
HIPAA, CMMC, trying to think some others. Then they've been pushing like critical infrastructure has a lot of push now as well, especially airports are getting a push to put certain things in place. They have a new framework. I'm trying to think. I think it's TSA that's doing the push onto the airports for some sort of compliance. It's not fully fleshed out. They're kind of like entrepreneuring this thing. Like I like to say they're building the plane as they fly it, but I've seen that with airports with one of the clients I have. So there are quite a few government specific ones.
On that note, Tyler,
I was going to look for the next question.
What do you think is the hardest part of being an MSP?
Hardest part, scaling labor. Definitely. So I'd say there's two parts, actually, two hardest parts. One, we've started to overcome, so I guess it's not top of mind. So, we started 4 years ago. February 1st makes 4 years, and we were all
Congrats.
technical, and none of us were salespeople. I was a sales engineer, but I did not understand how the leads got to me. It wasn't that I was completely oblivious as to how this might happen, but the difficulty and the processes and the mechanisms that made leads arrive at a sales engineer's desk to hop on a call and develop a solution that then became something that we were selling, was foreign. So figuring out how to get leads was a huge deal, and we've sort of got a process going that seems pretty reliable, but it's a pretty big machine. We invested in marketing early to spread our brand awareness out there, and you can't be, at least in this industry, does not feel that you can be overly salesy. You've got to just be authentic, and you've got to add credibility to yourself. You've got to have articles and content and things like that people can read and say, oh, this is a real company. So we invested in that early, and that has kind of snowballed and become pretty, at least regionally, credible, and then people are aware of WYRE's existence in this region, right? So that was early thing, and so credit Angela on our marketing team with all that. And then recently we started doing cold calling, which is not something that I ever thought that I would do or that I would be a part of. But we're not calling and saying, hey, would you like to hop on a 10-minute call and do a demo? And, we're not really asking for people's time. We're just saying, hi, nice to meet you. You may not know we exist, but wanted to just make you aware and see if there's anything we could ever do for you. And if you'd ever like a cup of coffee or to grab lunch, because we're doing this within 50 miles of Chattanooga right now. And so we're trying to just make ourselves known to the 1,500 target companies in that space in a very friendly way. So that's helping. So that's leads, right? And there's other stuff that goes into that, having a CRM that you're really tracking and building processes. That's been important. The other is essentially an MSP is a subscription to skilled labor. So you start with multi-role folks that are able to be support, be engineers, and be sales, and be business development and strategy and all this, right? So those folks are just changing hats every few minutes. And then you eventually take one off and you're like, welcome to WYRE, you have a support hat. And they get to kind of just do support. And that's not even true really, because they've got to sometimes be account managers and take care of people in a way that's not technical. And so that all scales to the point that hopefully you get to have more specialization. So we've now got 4 people in support, 4 engineers, and then the leadership team and marketing and like all these kind of departments that are really doing their own thing. But we manage 1,300-ish users right now every month, employees out there that call WYRE for support. And that requires all those staff to take care of them. And it's very difficult to cross this threshold of into profitability. So like we're good, we're healthy, but it's just it feels like a pretty decent sized company now, but it's still really expensive to just run, because you have to have so many skilled people, and you can't really hire anything but awesome people, and that those folks are expensive. And so it's just all salary. All of our costs are salary, and they're directly tied to onboarding new customers. So when you onboard that new customer and your revenue goes up, and you realize that now you've got to hire another support team member to make sure that the people who are there now are not dying, then we have to make that. And then it's like, and we stair-stepped up, and it felt good for a minute, and then we stair-stepped our expenses right behind. So that's the biggest challenge right now.
Yeah, that's like quite the balancing act for sure. Like I've been thinking about that with Tandem too. The sales, I would say, is by far the hardest. Like I could scale pen testing no problem, but like doing the pen testing, doing the sales, and doing marketing and all that at the same time, it's quite the balancing act. And then trying to figure out, how do I get in front of the clients without being a sleazeball sales guy? Because nobody likes that. One, I'm not that type of guy.
Put yourself out there authentically.
Yeah.
You do you're making posts, and you're just trying to add value. That's what we try to do. And even when we cold call, we're just trying to add value. We just want to say, hey, if you ever need help, there's another option.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to do it for sure. Yeah, we just started too. Well, we started last year. I was kind of playing with it in Q1 and been slowly morphing it into something with our sales rep program we have, where like taking people who are interested in it building an academy and then trying to train them and get them to learn it and learn the sales techniques and not how to be a sleazeball, but how to be genuine and how to do it well. And that's something different too. Yeah, it's hard.
Different skill set too. Training entry level folks, we haven't figured it out ourselves at all in any field. So we've never hired successfully anyone entry level. We've had to hire people with experience, and that's where it's very expensive. And it feels like, well, if we could just get somebody entry level, we could train them to be our way, whether that's support, sales, whatever. But that takes fractions of time away from the people who were already overworked doing the work. And so it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
We talked about this last time, right, AJ, where we were like when you're a smaller business, you have to make every hire count. You can't afford to have a bad hire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Especially because it can actually cost the organization money compared to like your customers paying for it. But that's, you said you've never hired a junior person. That's not necessarily true. I mean, you had an intern, you have, I don't know how to describe him.
We have not onboarded someone for a permanent position and successfully trained them from no knowledge to the level that we need for our support team. So we did recently have an intern who was awesome and who we hope to, if he ever sees this, then the secret's out. We hope to hire him at some point soon, but those things, that's an investment. It's not, you don't immediately get a return. And when you're looking at cash flow and making sure that every new resource that you pour any money into is adding value to the team that's there, they're going to be like, it's great that we have an intern, but also like, are they helping carry the load? And if they're not, then this is very difficult to do at our size. It's great if you're an enterprise and you can put the intern in there to job shadow somebody and kind of help here and there. And if they're a net neutral or a slightly net negative on productivity, then that's okay. Here it's just the margins are so small in resource capacity.
Yeah, I've done a lot of mentoring in the cybersecurity space specifically. And when I talk to people who are looking to break into the industry, I try to help them understand you don't want to just pass these tests and stuff and get these pieces of paper. What you need to convey is that it's going to be easier to train you than the other guy or gal interviewing. That's what they want to know. They want to know that we can get you up to speed faster than them. That's what's going to get you hired, and that you're going to be a good fit when you're at that organization.
And we talked about the trade-offs before with the rotational programs in a kind of similar fashion. But we've also seen, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes you have the wrong person. And then, like you mentioned, performing at an enterprise. And when you're at that level, it can be more difficult when you're hiring a junior person and then having to take time away from your senior personnel to train that person, or like they give them a task and then they just don't do the task. And you're like, okay, now you're just negatively impacting the team. And we're not actually getting anything out of having you here. So like it makes it difficult to actually like come back to zero. Mike, got thoughts?
Well, like in the support role, especially what Tyler's talking about, even in pen testing realm, you have someone that's low skilled entry level. When they mess up, it's a big mess up usually. And not only is it taking the time away, but now it could be costing your business money to fix the mess that they made. So there's a lot of, the reverse of it, there's not a lot of room for error in these roles. And you have to really have kid gloves on to keep them in the lines so that you don't have that mess. But you also still have to kind of give them enough room to learn as well, because that's the only way they're going to get to where you need them to be. They have to make mistakes, just not big ones, and then continue to learn from those mistakes along the way.
Yeah, and philosophically, we are all about it. Like we want to be a place that almost has an apprenticeship model. Walk in the door as a competent, driven person, and we'll skill you up. Like we can teach the right person whatever they need to know. The biggest risk for us is character. Like you just have to have an amazing character to work here, because I'm sure it's the same for you. Reputation is everything. Trust, both of our clients are trusting us with their entire business. It's all of their data, all of their customer information, their operation. If we put somebody on something and it gets broken and they're down for any reason, that's lost revenue. That's just a bad time. And word spreads much more quickly for bad news than it does for good. So it takes years to build what we have now, which is just a widespread positive, I think, reputation in our area. But it would crumble rapidly if we just had somebody make a catastrophic mistake, or if we had a customer get hacked, God forbid, right? Like, you can't prevent everything, but all those things, are just really hard to overcome. So we have not had anything like that happen. So it's important that we do everything we can to prevent that.
Image really is everything, especially these days where it's so easy just to hop on a YouTube video and talk shit. Like,
Yeah.
Hop in Google reviews or Yelp or whatever and just like, hey, AJ sucks, or Tyler's team broke all my things and now I can't work. Mike let all the hackers in. He's a bad guy. Look at him. It's so easy. And then there's no validation of that. It's there.
Yeah. And it B2B.
That's it.
In business to business services like this, like, who is your person that's going to leave you that Google review? It's so hard to come by. We've got 1,300 people that we help every day, but a handful of Google reviews. And we've asked sometimes, but you want to make sure it's super relevant and that it's somebody that can really tell the story. But we have a handful, maybe a dozen or so, and they're all 5 stars. But at that ratio, 1-star review with just somebody that had a bad, say, support interaction, which, is extremely important for us to prevent, but if we did hire that one person that popped off at somebody because they were being rude, maybe they weren't being rude, it doesn't matter. Now you get a 1-star review and you're like 1 out of 12 is bad. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah. Being a leader, it's your butt on the line, even if you're not directly involved.
And then, by connection, it's everybody here. Any negative on WYRE, we're so small, it's important that for us all to have security in this role. Like, we've got to have a good reputation, because more business means more help for them and more help for the company as a whole.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, for us doing pen testing, we don't even like to do reviews. It's very rare because we don't want people to know who our clients are. One, and we wouldn't want we wouldn't, even if they wanted us, allowed us to do it, we'd feel funny doing it. So to have them put a review on, they hacked us real good, it's kind of weird. You're putting a lot of information out there that you don't want. Like, we do everything that we can to put all these barriers in place to that sensitive data, but letting them know this person is here that they're interested in, that just gives them, I'm like, okay, now I can just spend more time and maybe find a way in. Like, I understand. I played the bad guy. I know how it goes.
Yeah, certainly. And we wouldn't want anybody putting anything sensitive out there. And most of our testimonials are in pretty non-sensitive industries with people that are just happy to sing our praises, but we're not telling any secrets for sure.
Yeah, we didn't have anything on our site forever. So it was like, well, let's just start putting our like partners or channel partners and stuff on there. That at least give us some credibility, because it's hard. You don't have anyone that can vouch for you. And it's just people like AJ can vouch for me. Like, yeah, he does some goofy stuff. He's all right, but if you don't know me, you don't know me. Everyone can say they can break into stuff and hack stuff and, they're a lead or whatever stupid thing they want to say, but you don't know. You have no clue.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you. We know.
Even then, if they say that, you don't know that you can actually trust them to not like share or exploit the data that they've obtained during a penetration test. So that's something that obviously both any organization relies on trust of their customers, but I feel like specifically, like Tyler, you kind of hit on this earlier. You, as a managed services provider, right, have elevated accounts into these organizations where you control their emails. So you could, if you really wanted to, spy on these people, or if WYRE were to get compromised in some case, right? Similar to Tandem has vulnerabilities and how to exploit those vulnerabilities with very specific instructions. So both of these cases, right, are detrimental to whichever client it may belong to, were it to get out. And so I think both of these, and I know WYRE makes a lot of customer connections through word of mouth, and I'm sure pen test with Tandem is pretty similar. You're not going to be like, publicizing, oh yeah, this company came in and hacked us and took 30 minutes to get domain admin. But, hey, they took the time to explain to us what we needed to do, how to fix these issues. They recommended a partner to like fix this if we didn't know how to do it and stuff like that. Like, I think those two things are pretty closely aligned with Tandem and WYRE. And it makes sense, obviously, being partners. So kudos to y'all. You're welcome for that little marketing spiel. But
Thanks, AJ.
do believe it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy now that you're like talking. I should have went into this naturally because I'm always thinking about it, but yeah, like that level of access, it's hard. Like I've been in a pen test where they've had internal IT team, and the whole attack chain is just missteps from the IT team. Oh, they didn't even put a password here. It's passwordless. And then they store their password on the system in the browser, and I was able to get that. And look, they're the domain admin. So now I have everything. And it's usually just these missteps. But when you have a good company that really has that relationship and knows how to discuss problems with their clients, you get into these environments and you're like, yeah, this is rough. This is going to take me some time. And I'm pulling my hair out on the last day, and maybe I'll get in on the last day, but it's a fight the whole way. And I love to see that, but you just don't see it very often. I've had another one where it was a managed service provider, and we were doing Eternal Blue, and that's old. Like what you were saying, 30 minutes, done. Eternal Blue, Metasploit, exploit, and done, over. It's like, wow. And then I just kept finding more stuff. Not that they needed it, but I'm going to use my time wisely and just try to, here's a list. But it's like, wow, you actually have someone that's supposed to be taking care of this for you. What's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that as well. And we aren't necessarily going in for a penetration test, but we often do security assessments from a different perspective. We're coming in with creds and looking around, and we were at a place in 2023 that was having issues and kind of just working on systems. And I'm in vCenter checking out some stuff. I'm logged into the DC, and then go back the next day, sit back down, keep working, and doing the same thing. But somebody was like, "Oh, did you get the Wi-Fi password?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm on the Wi-Fi." I was like, I use that password on the board over there. And it's like, "Oh, that's a student or whatever." And it's like, I'm in a DC. I'm on a guest network. I'm on vCenter. I'm on the guest network. You see things like that, and you're just like, wow. Like there's so many people. But the point being here that you have to then talk to the customer and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be very straightforward with you and say that you really need to fix something, but without making them feel like an idiot or that they have a terrible staff or that a panic. It's like we do need to get this fixed. Quickly, but without anybody necessarily feeling like they're about to lose their job. And so it's a sensitive situation when you find things like that.
Yeah, we have that problem too, especially like if we work with vendor partners like yourself, or like, this is a team sport, first of all. We know no one's perfect. So when we find severed, we make sure we convey to the client, it's no one's fault here. Things happen. And let's talk with this, get everyone in the room. Let's talk about the best way of going about fixing this. I know, like, I said it on the podcast before, when we worked with your team, stuff was being fixed on the spot, like in the call. I'm like, wow, this is a first. Never has that happened before, which is good to see. But it is that balance where you're like, this is bad. Someone did mess up, but please don't fire them. Things happen. Let's just fix this and put processes in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. Because a lot of it's just a people problem. We're humans. We make mistakes. It just happens. You change something to fix something. You forgot to change it back.
Or they've been told to do 20 things and they
was on
the list. It just wasn't thing one.
Yeah. And, people are just moving so fast. It happens. And so that's the game we play.
You've also got, it's just like I was reading the other day, it was another Fortinet vulnerability where like credentials were in plain text for some reason. And yeah, I don't know if it was an amalgamation of all the Fortinet vulnerabilities that had been observed recently or what, but you have security, or not security, but you have tooling issues as well, right? So this is a hypothetical example. I don't know what customers use, but assume a customer uses a Fortinet VPN, which is managed by WYRE Technology. Mike goes in, does a pen test, sees that he's able to obtain access through the VPN without needing MFA or anything by guessing passwords or exploiting a vulnerability. It would look like it's WYRE's fault, but it could be the original people who installed the firewall or who do patching, and maybe that doesn't fall under WYRE's purview. So there's these things, and we've talked about this kind of in passing before, where like you need to know what is your MSP's responsibility versus what is your responsibility, and not make assumptions, because that can be very costly for either side. And just not only people make issues, but also, technology breaks or is exploited. There's a very big industry for that. So it could be that no one actually did something wrong and someone just found something fun. I was reading earlier, this person, I don't know that this was true just because of all the like Gen Z language that was used, but it was basically this person reviewing source code for this company, and it was like COBOL and some other old language. I forgot what it was, but they were basically adding comments to the code, like, this code is older than I am, and like, I bet this code has like social security checks or something, right? Well,
That's
then
amazing.
they were like, this authentication token's kind of thick with like 2 C's, right? Meaning that it's like, it's big, it's long.
Yeah.
Well,
Clarify
then,
that for who are you clarifying it for, me or Tyler?
for our listeners, of course. And so it ended up going to like a senior dev, and they looked at it, and it was an authentication bypass in their app that existed the entire time they've had their code. And
It's old school back doors. That's what that was.
probably, yeah. But it was just, the post itself was so funny because the Jira ticket comment afterwards was like, "Oh my gosh, bestie, you slayed," or something to that effect, which it's ridiculous, which is why I don't think it might not have been real. But I could see that happening if it didn't, especially like if I was to write code and then have you review it, you would be like, "Oh yeah, this is trash."
Yeah, 100%.
And then find a way to exploit it.
I tell you, that'll be the first comment on everything. You're right, AJ. Yeah. We should have my friend Kevin on. He is a manager or senior manager at a company. He's a dev. He writes Java. Feel free to give him as much grief as you want about that. But I'd be curious the funny stuff he sees from like junior devs or people like interns or people right out of college. It'd probably be pretty funny.
Yeah.
That,
So Tyler, I guess since we're kind of on this topic with coding and
All over.
yeah, and vulnerabilities and stuff, have you seen a case where, obviously don't disclose who, but have you seen an instance where there was like a critical vulnerability, or maybe it was a 0-day or like a week 1 type of event or something, and you tried to patch or remediate a customer and they pushed back?
I don't think so. I don't think most of our customers don't push back because they just trust us to do it, right? Like whatever it is,
Wow.
just do it. And none of our customers have systems that can't go down for like entire quarters, right? Like any given weeknight, at least one, say during the week, we could have an outage window to get something fixed. And even when I worked at TVA, then this is no secret. It's like my LinkedIn, right? So even when I worked at TVA, all those systems have to get patched. And, this is like critical infrastructure, the whole state, 7-state region runs on. I mean, everybody has to patch. And I worked there on the compute team during some major vulnerabilities, that we had to stay up all night and patch tons of systems and coordinate with sensitive infrastructure and get that stuff done. So I think that like, as long as you communicate and you don't cry wolf and, you don't say like, oh, we have to do this all the time. Then when you say we have to do this, like the people that trust you just say, okay.
To clarify real quick, TVA is not the time variance authority. It is the Tennessee Valley Authority, right?
People who are not in the South.
Yeah, you don't control timelines. They produce power.
Well, TVA is like a TV thing too. I forget what it
I
stands
think
for.
they had peak demand of all time yesterday. Pretty sure that's true.
Yeah. I was at dinner with an engineer and they were talking about last year when it snowed, or 2 years ago. It was right before I moved, and it was a field engineer. His site was the first one to go down because of the usage.
Which is the grid is a crazy giant mechanism. Not to rabbit hole too much, but a site going down.
Feel free to rabbit hole as much as you would like. We do plenty.
Favorite fun fact that surely nobody knows about power generation, especially TVA. There's this nuclear plant in North Alabama called Bellefonte that never got finished. The funding always got cut, and then they'd come back and work on it for years, and then they'd cut the funding again. So there's this giant nuclear plant, towers and everything, right? You drop down the highway and you see it. It's never made nuclear power, but this older guy I used to work with at TVA told me that it made power one time, and there was a huge demand, and they had diesel generators on site just to keep the place going. And they said, hook the diesel generators to the grid. And so they did this to backfeed power in. And I was like, that's crazy.
That's what you call YOLO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like, I've heard stories, like there's a pretty famous story of a brownout. I think it's considered a brownout, not a blackout, up north, where too many of the plants or substations went out and just had a cascading effect because they were all pretty much daisy chained in the Northeast, and it just went,
Yeah.
and knocked them all out.
Wow.
Yeah, insane. It's like you start hearing things like, wow, our infrastructure is so brittle.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much.
We could let things right now, but Anthony, could you give a redacted version just to circle back to cybersecurity? So before we worked with Tandem, we did a couple security assessments on our own that were pretty deep. Anthony, what was your favorite of those that we worked on together? Your favorite thing, and how did you get to it?
I don't know if this was what you were expecting. Were you expecting the note?
The what?
The note?
No, I expect you to talk about a bank account.
Well, I mean, that's cool and all, but my favorite thing. Okay, so
I'm excited. I want to hear this.
I'll talk about my favorite thing. It should be fine. It happened in the 80s, but there was a customer who maintained call logs essentially for a very long period of time. Again, I said this happened in the 80s, so 40 years. Maybe it was the 90s, but it was significantly long, right? Probably way longer than any data retention needs. And in the call notes, and this might have to get cut, but in the call notes, it's Tennessee. It said, so and so called again. I think he's on crack.
That's amazing.
How did you get in that system?
Yeah. So there was an open network where once you got onto the network, you were able to kind of pivot, and the Wi-Fi password was also in rocky.txt, although I would not have thought it was because it was like a weird password. So for those of you who might not know, rocky.txt is a giant word list. And so if you're trying to attack Wi-Fi or... Jeez. My painting just fell.
Are you okay? Do I need to get Liam Neeson?
Yeah, I'm fine, but my painting just fell off my wall, and I don't know why, because nothing is touching the wall. So, okay. The word list can commonly be used to basically not crack passwords. Well, I guess it is crack passwords, right? Like, you compare the hash to the hash of the actual password. Yeah, Mike?
I love hearing your explanations
Shut
for
up.
stuff, so I'm going to just let you keep rolling with it.
Is it right or is it wrong?
Say it again in another way. No, don't Google it. This ruins all the fun.
I already gave you an opportunity. Anyways,
Heck all the things.
word lists can be used to compromise credentials in whichever manner you seem fit. And then it was an open network, and so you could move laterally, especially through SMB, server message block on Windows, and then you could access certain things. I found a password for a bank account. I logged into said bank account. There was no MFA. If there's one thing that anyone in this episode will tell you to implement for your own good, it is MFA.
Don't make it your email account.
Also, don't do that, because I got into the bank account and took a nice screenshot. Then I think later, Mike, you also got into the bank account.
I did not log in. I thought about it. I did not log in because like I weigh the pros and cons. Was like, does this actually show anything in particular or not? Like, does it progress the attack chain? Like, could I use that information for anything? And then I won't do it. So I thought about it seriously, but I was like, it's not going to lead me to anywhere. As long as I can show I could, if I wanted to,
So
I'll leave it there.
you don't know that you could,
I was pretty positive.
because
I was pretty positive based off of the user and all the other stuff, passwords that I got that worked.
but what if there was MFA? The
That's fair.
impact that you would have disclosed could have been different.
And that was one of the arguments for doing it that was in my mind. It was like, well, there
The
could be,
impact-
but
Why we did it, because probably not the same exact reason, but it really told the story. Like the whole report, that was all they cared about, was like,
really?
Yeah.
So you're saying I should start taking screenshots of bank accounts now?
It really, I mean, it gets people. I mean, it shows the actual outcome. Like what is, like all the stuff that we say that is even mildly technical is like, okay, you need to close down this port. You need to segregate this network. You need to not allow this sort of authentication. And they're like, okay, cool. But it's like, but also I'm in your bank account. And it's like, that's all I really cared that you just said. It's so impactful to them because it's so real and terrifying. And you're not trying to terrify them. That's where that sensitivity comes in. You're like, okay, listen, don't panic, but you need to change that password and you need to get MFA. And if they don't offer MFA at that bank, you need to change banks.
Yeah. I looked at it in terms of like risk for us. Like if something were to happen, then after that point, it'd be a huge risk on us. Like we may start getting the blame for it as the company breaking in the stuff, because hackers get blamed for everything. I don't know if you know this. But they would immediately, everyone would blame us for whatever goes wrong. So some of it's like a risk balance, risk versus reward. Yeah. Stylization choices.
Yeah. Well, I think it was obviously different scenarios, right? Because when you looked at this customer, it was obviously after I had looked at the customer. So that was like potentially a repeat finding from a different attack vector. But and they gave us a record of their previous penetration test, and it was exactly what you hate. It was 40 pages of a vulnerability scan with no context, no real explanation. The kicker, and this one really grinds my gears, they also identified the Wi-Fi password existed in rocku.txt, but did not explain what that meant or push the customer to change that password. So again, I got into their bank account because I had the Wi-Fi password, which I could have guessed and done a deauth or whatever. There's different ways to get into the network. But the point is, that was the only, at the time, that was the only real piece blocking everything else that I did, right? So showing at that point in time, again, that we could access their bank account because there was no MFA, because it was an open network, because Sally, that's not her real name, I hope, had a list of passwords, right? Like, because of these things, like, you no longer can provide service to your customers. We impacted you this much money, like, theoretically. And when you put that into perspective, like, the community feels that pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the organization because they have the money and all that stuff, but they're
job.
there to provide a service to the community. So it was actually appreciated. And after I took it, I had the same thought, Mike. I was like, I'm going to jail. Great. But fortunately, everyone was cool. And I no longer break into bank accounts unless it's requested.
You never know with clients, man. I've had some clients, especially when I worked at a huge pen test firm before I kind of started doing my own thing. And you never know. Some clients will fight you tooth and nail over findings too. And like one of the things they teach you, because that's where I cut my teeth in pen testing, was at that big company. They teach you to draft an impactful narrative, exactly what you're talking about, building a narrative around your finding that makes them piques their interest, right? So like, for instance, a lot of times you'll see new hackers get an cross-site scripting vulnerability, and it just prints something out on the screen. No one really cares about that, right? But if you can show how that allows you to take over an account or progress into a much larger attack chain, now it makes sense. Now we're going to care about it. But you always want to tie it into something they care about and that they're interested in. Otherwise, they're just going to be very dismissive about your findings. And that's really a skill that you learn as you pen test more. And it is a balance. Like I said, stylization choice, like you went and did the bank account. Cool. There's no right or wrong answer there. It was just a matter of, and I was 100% tempted to do it. And I thought about it long. I literally sat there and I dated a lawyer at the time. I was like, should I log into this bank account? And she was like, no. I was like, but I really want to. It'll be a good part of the report. She was another voice, in that brain being an attorney. But it really is a fine line when you're doing security assessments. There's a tiny, tiny thin line there of what the right answer is and what the wrong answer is. And it could change day to day. And sometimes we take risks, like there's exploits out there you do. And it's like, hey, I'm on day 5 of a 5-day pen test. I haven't got a foothold anywhere. I have this vulnerability I've been sitting on, but there's a risk it may bring down the server. And I haven't used it because I was looking for something that won't have that potential impact. Well, I kind of want to use it now because I don't have another choice. And that's when you make the choice, but it's all about that risk. And I would on day 5, I would be like, hey, and I'd bring the customer in, hey, I have this exploit. I want to use it. There's a chance things may go down. I just want you to be prepared. Is there a specific time I can do this where it won't impact operations? Because we do want to know if you are vulnerable to it, because it's still a finding no matter what. I just don't want to impact operations. That's all here.
Exactly.
So
Are
it's a game.
Are we helping them achieve their mission, or are we just having fun? And it's okay to have fun, but as long as it still helps them achieve their mission, right?
Yeah, it's all about the client at the end of the day, period. Like you don't want to have a negative impact on them without a net gain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and to clarify, I made sure Mike Wade watched me when I was logging into the account. So be sure you have TPI or two-person integrity if you're going to do something like that.
Military word.
Yeah, because you never know. And I mean, like we say this, but people have actually been sued and put in jail for hacking when, I don't remember, I know someone was put in jail. I don't remember the exact case, but they were hired to do something and they basically didn't have written authorization to do it. So the company like sued them for it, even though they hired them. Like, I don't, it was some weird thing. I'll look
You're
it
not
up.
talking about the coal fire case, are you?
Maybe.
Where they got arrested in the prisons, or is it a different one? Or the jailhouse, or not the courts. They got arrested doing a physical pen test of the courthouses in Texas. Because that was an interesting case. I changed a lot of my contracts because of that case, actually.
Yeah, I think that was what I was talking about.
Do you know what I'm talking about, Tyler? Have you heard of that one?
No, but I have an anecdotal story about it because Mike Wade told me stories years and years ago about doing that in courthouses. He would physically go pen test courthouses and take a picture of the server closet. This was when everything was on-prem. And he would probably have some funny stories about this.
I bet he would. Yeah, this one was crazy because the setup here was that the state hired this company to test the counties. And so they were in a county courthouse when they got arrested. The sheriff, I guess, from some small town, didn't even think this was a job or a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get out of jail free card, that, hey, this is my document that says I'm authorized to be here. No one picked up the phone that was on the call list either, so that didn't help. But they spent the night in jail. They were trying to get them to plead down to charges. And the county was saying the state was not authorized to do these pen tests on their behalf. And so they had to bring in an independent third party to look at the evidence to validate whether or not the state could authorize pen tests on the behalf of the county. And so that was what the big confrontation was about. The county said, no, only we can do this. The state was like, no, we're the state. We can do what we want. And then you just have these innocent pen testers trapped in the middle of this fight. Crazy.
That's wild.
Yeah. It's a good Darknet Diaries. We keep bringing them up. There's a great podcast on it. Darknet Diaries is probably my favorite cybersecurity podcast. That and Malicious Life, but I just saw where Rand Levy was retiring the podcast now. But sad news.
Yeah. Be awesome if we could do something with darknet. Tyler here decided to have me go to a place without a get out of jail free card. So
Way to go, Tyler.
I did not.
It wasn't that sensitive. You were fine.
You say that, but this was after Coalfire, and the person, so this CTO, is that who it was that knew? Someone
Sure.
knew,
Right. That seems right.
and so he left, right? So they couldn't bother him to like ask to make sure that I was like supposed to be there. And then I could have plugged in a rubber ducky or something because there was a computer that no one was paying attention to. And then I was like, oh, well, let me try to talk to them and see if I can get further instead of going upstairs and going to the closet, which I'm sure I could have done. But then I just like kind of panicked and sat there for like 20 minutes waiting. And I was like, I'm just going to leave. And like left. And then they pulled up the security cameras and they actually like showed the guy, I guess who I was. And like, did he ask you if it was me or something? How did that part go?
I'm sure it's been a while, but it all was fine. Like it was definitely fine. We had authorizations for everything, and you knew who you were.
I would love to see AJ on physical pen tests, though. I think that would be amazing and make him carry a camera. And we can see him leverage those acting skills and just have him dress up and do different things. It'd be amazing. This would be great. And just block out all the company logos and just make a series out of it. It'd be amazing.
For sure.
Yeah. I would
see how good of an actor you are under pressure.
I would want some, one, I'm going to need tools. Like,
I can teach you to, actually, I will get my kid to teach you how to pick a lock. She is amazing. Primo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
She's better than I am at it. Yeah. Anything you can buy from like Lowe's or Walmart, she can pick in probably 30 seconds. Yeah. She's good. Little ninja.
I saw that video. I'm sure, some people have seen this. It's fairly old. I think it came out maybe when we were in the Air Force, but where they did a physical penetration test of a subcenter. I think that's the terminology.
Like a submarine?
No. Like the electrical grid, like substation. So they like put the carpet over the barbed wire, hopped the fence, like had a little thing to like pull the lever doors in, like the motion cameras. You could just spray air, like an air duster through it.
Yeah, upside down. Yeah. That's a good trick.
And then they like completely owned the place, dropped malware, had full access, like took photos of stuff, and then they just like hung out and then they left. It's on YouTube. You can find it. But stuff like that, like it looks cool and all. I've never done something like that, and I'm kind of an idiot. So I would want some training before I get sent in.
Here, I'll talk to some buddies. I have a couple of guys that I used to work with, and now they do a class for physical. I think they do it down in Tampa. We can go down there. I'll do it with you.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
How are you in?
Yeah, one of them works for Black Hills. Ralph May, I think is his name, and then the other guy slipped my brain, but they all worked at Optiv. That's who I used to work with. That's who we all work together.
Nice name drop there.
Hey, great team back in the day. I don't know how they are now, but yeah, it was a dream team back then. Like top heavy hitters were all working. I got to learn from the best. Like I'll say it any day. They were amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could do it. They teach all that stuff, all the lock picking under the door, the badge cloning, all that stuff is part of their course.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so I was gonna say you have the Flipper Zero, right?
And a dedicated RFID cloner as well. But yeah, we have a flipper for that too.
Nice.
Yeah, Flipper's sick, man.
I'd like to do it. I'd be nervous though if I was there. I'm not like, I don't know. I'd be different. I'd just be the quiet. I'd let you do the talking and just be like, No, just like be the one picking the locks.
That would be a video that Lavezzo would like put together. Like I could just see that being like you said, a series of just like Mike and AJ at it again.
Yeah, physical hacking stuff. Now that'd be fun. I was asked to do a sheriff's department one time, and I said, yeah, right. And simply because I have a policy of don't do it where they have guns, because I don't want to get shot.
Well, what about, so you obviously have a partner, which is an airport. would you do an airport?
I would. Like, I've walked through and given them stuff. Like, I didn't do a traditional physical pen test. It was more of a physical assessment, which I offered to do at the sheriff's as well. Where, like, if you want to bring someone official with me, we can walk through this place and I can point out the things I will do. Like, that's kind of what we do too with some of the services we have at Tandem. We're like, we'll talk to you about your project and we'll tell you what we'll abuse. Because most of the time, if you give me a new client, I'll tell you exactly how I'm going to get in. And it will work 99% of the time. I promise.
Mhm.
Like, there's a little bit of flavor I throw in there every time and adapt slightly, but it's pretty close to the same attack chain. Unless I've been working with them for a while and they fixed it. But almost every new company, just about the same attack chain. So I can tell you what I'm going to do. So if I just tell me what you got going on, yep, I'd hit you there. Boom. We don't have to, I don't have to get shot to do it.
Yeah, you've been shot at enough in your previous career.
Yeah, I'm good. I don't have any more cat lives. That's what I like to say. That's for sure.
What do you think? So kind of bringing this back to the topic.
Back to the topic.
Yeah, we need like a trademark term for for that. Obviously, WYRE Technology is an MSP. You're a penetration tester. What would you say are some things that you would be able to abuse to get into an MSP, and why that might be a bad thing for MSP related customers?
You're like, if I was to target Tyler's company, what type of things would I look to abuse? Yeah, good question. I would start probably with a lot of the typical things where we do a lot of external reconnaissance where we're looking for elite credentials. And so that's a key place to look. I would imagine Tyler's company would have MFA installed. So I may look for something a roundabout way, like maybe a VPN or something that doesn't utilize it, or exploit on that VPN where you can get around it or grab credentials. And MFA it depends on what type it is, what type of MFA it is. It could just be like the push one where it just allows. And if you do like they call it fatigue, basically you just do it enough and I'm like, all right, fine, I'll let you in. But those would be the ones I would do. Phishing is always a good one if you have a good pretext with it. Phishing is a way around MFA. And the reason why people don't understand this is, and I try to explain, we like to test at different levels because something can fail along the way. You just don't know where it's at. So we want to test all the way along the attack chain. So say we can bypass MFA by phishing. So what that means is, if one of their users can install something or execute something on their own, we're utilizing their credentials they already have on that system. And so the hope for his company would be, I'm targeting a tech or someone in support with all this access, and they're likely to have higher privilege on that system, or it doesn't really matter. I can privilege escalate almost, I would say 99.9% of the time, there's a privilege escalation technique I can use to get the local system administrator, which means I'm now king of that system. And now I can pull all the passwords and password hashes from memory or from the Chrome browser if they have, or whatever browser they have, I can pull credentials. So now, boom, I'm now on the network. I now have all these access. Now I can look through their history, see where they're connecting to their different infrastructure. I can cruise the logs to see what type of things they're running. And now it's just a matter of figuring out how they access the stuff internally. But that's pretty much my approach I would do. If I couldn't get from the outside, then I would try phishing because I get around a lot of stuff by just getting them to click something. Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. And I'll pull the curtain back a little bit and help you out with some. And also I think that it's heartening. The industry's come a long way, the MSP industry, because it's a concentrated vulnerability. Not gonna lie, right? Like if you have a sloppy MSP, it's bad. We've recovered other clients from sloppy MSPs that have made really terrible mistakes and used passwords across all their customers, same password everywhere. And so I think one of the most important tools in MSP's arsenal to prevent that is a really awesome password management system. So we're all random passwords, and within our password management system, you have OTP stored there, and then every reveal is tracked and logged. So, and most of our applications are SaaS. So from the ticketing system, the remote monitoring and management system, and then of course all the applications that most of our clients use are software, software as a service. So there's not a lot of infrastructure from a VPN server, none of that. We don't have a server in the building. We don't have VPNs directly we may have a couple clients that we have a VPN but I don't think there's a site to site stood up actively to anybody right now. But there could be, some of them have to VPN into, that's a client VPN. So there's not a ton of infrastructure here to have. There's basically nothing. It's laptops and a firewall. So, and then our credentials that are most important and critical to our customers are global admin on Microsoft 365, Azure AD. And those are just in time. So they have to request elevation for a period of time and then get approved. So it's getting harder, thank God. So
It's impressive. Yeah. I don't ever see that thorough of a lockdown. Yeah, that's awesome.
I really legitimately welcome, we should schedule some time to see if you can poke around. But the MGM hack, I know, is a stain right now. And so there are challenges. I won't lie, there are challenges. And we're looking at some tools to overcome one of the biggest challenges, which is doesn't have to be this sophisticated, but with AI coming up to voice specifically, voice AI coming around where you could train on a voice. You've seen the Joe Rogan fake podcast and stuff like that, right? If you have a super high value user at a client, somebody calls in, uses the voice, it's very convincing. Somebody does something for a customer and it wasn't that customer, that's a big deal. And so we're looking to implement a way of authentication that is agnostic to the knowledge of the staff or the knowledge even of the customer. It would be something that's like a rolling code that they have to tell us based on an application on their phone or a push notification from Microsoft or something like that. So those are challenges. Those are the kind of things that take down big companies because it's really hard to authenticate everybody that calls in from all these companies that have different levels of technology. But it is something that we're paying attention to and something we're going to find a technology solution and a process solution.
Yeah, that's fun. And just to put out to you, the listeners, this is basically what you would call a brief tabletop exercise where you're kind of role playing like, hey, this is what I would do. This is what I would do to counter that. These are things I would have in place. And then you would kind of go back and forth, working through your processes and tools and talk about these things, essentially looking for problematic areas that you can dive into later and shore up without actually having to do a full pen test or a full security assessment. Just to put that out there, that's pretty much what you heard right there. So that's pretty cool. Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, of course. And that didn't come from a place of defense, but
no, it's fantastic.
There's a lot that can go wrong, but luckily there's more and more tools kind of helping us plug those holes.
Yeah, and really, companies should be taking the approach y'all are taking, where you're doing all these different layers because you never know where something's going to break. Like I was saying earlier. And it could be a third party, like SolarWinds is a big example. All these companies just got instantly, they're breached. Mm-hmm. How? Well, they just bought a product and that that vendor got breached and now they're all breached. It happens. But when you have those layers in there, like where you have to check out credentials, you have that audit trail, you have these different layers, you've kind of segmented your network and move to doing SaaS stuff, you make it much more difficult for attackers to move quickly and take stuff out of there. And that's what you want. You want to add friction to an attacker's process to give you time to stop them, to detect them and stop them before they can really do damage.
Yeah. Layers for sure. You might phish somebody, but then if they have to request admin and they're like, why are you requesting admin for that? It doesn't make any sense. That's the biggest thing that we've had biggest issue we've had with cybersecurity with our clients is wire fraud. So we've never had anybody breached, but we have helped some folks that have wired money to places, unfortunately, because they just got phished. Sometimes even on their personal email accounts, right? They're doing business in non-procedural ways. And the remedy to that is sometimes not additional email security or additional anti-phishing. It's training and it's process. So before you send a wire that is not 100% the exact same thing you do and even if it is something you do regularly, just pick up the phone and call and be like, hey, can we confirm this account number real quick? And this is the correct amount. And you are this person. It's a yes, but yeah, that it's the layers and sometimes it's super non-technical.
Yeah. I've I've always like coached clients, like one of the cheapest ways you can increase your level of security is by training your people,
Mm-hmm.
having some sort of user awareness training going on, because, you know, it's going to take a while to build it up, but what you want is that spidey sense. This doesn't seem right. That's what you want to cultivate.
Mm-hmm.
Them second guessing things that are slightly abnormal. And it's going to save you so much money. And then, you prevent one wire fraud, you're probably paid for the whole training program because it's so cheap now. It really isn't that expensive to do phishing stuff. And I mean, we don't do it anymore because it's just go pay $1,000 or whatever, and you can do it all year long. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't need me to do it. It's, pay me for a week or 2 weeks to build a piece of malware that's going to bypass all your stuff and actually execute. Costs too much money. Just allow it in the thing, and then there's a bunch of samples you can do, but just do it. Send them training. Do phishing. Boom. You just saved yourself a lot of money for real cheap.
Yep. Humans are the final vulnerability
Oh, yeah.
at the end of the day.
All right. Let's see. Here's the two questions I do want to cover that we had asked. So do companies actually in your eyes, see security as a cost center? This is my myth busting questions. This is what we hear all the time in cybersecurity. What do you think?
I think it depends on the company. Again, with your smaller companies, they see anything that does not make money actively coming in the door as a cost center. Absolutely. Companies that have a mature sense of risk management, maybe not. Maybe they see it as an investment. Maybe they see it as cheap insurance. It just depends on the maturity of the company, and in some situations, what compliance they're. So a situation where it's actually making them money is when implementing a cybersecurity control or system or what have you, or having a pen test done, qualifies them to do business and under a regulatory framework that they have to comply with. Then they make money. They get the opportunity to participate in markets that are locked out to people who aren't doing that. And so again, that's where kind of regulation can be a good sales tool. But outside of those mature companies, high regulation companies, then often yes.
Speaking of insurance, have you worked a lot with insurance? Kind of what have you been seeing over the last couple of years in terms of the change? Because that's moving pretty rapidly as an industry itself.
Yeah. So insurance as in cyber risk insurance.
Yes,
So,
cyber insurance.
right. So we make sure that our clients have cyber risk insurance. And so we want that to be the first line of defense in the event of an incident. Okay, let's go to the policy and we can confirm that, we helped check all these boxes. We confirmed on the initial audit that you were compliant. You should get this payout. We've never had any of our customers have never been breached. So, at this stage, that's not been an issue, but, things do happen. Consulted with some companies, often free of charge, to help them fill out their insurance forms. And unfortunately, many times they don't actually qualify, and it's not a good idea to say, well, I mean, you can say whatever you want to say, but we say, you're not qualified. It's like, if you mark that box and then you do have a claim, they're going to deny the claim. And so you're actually going to pay this premium. And then in the event that you ever needed it, you will not get payout. And so I think that insurance companies are being more stringent on making sure that you are compliant with the requirements. MFAs enabled is a huge one, obviously. And then what does that mean? What does MFA enabled mean on one system, on all your systems? And so I think that that's becoming more granular, and that they're losing money. Insurance companies don't want to make those payouts. So
What have you seen as the biggest disqualifier on those? Definitely curious about that.
I think MFA is a big one, just because it's simple. It seems simple, but they may have it set to enrolled but not enforced. And so they're like, oh, everybody has MFA. It's like, you enrolled in MFA, but you're not enforcing MFA. You don't have conditional access policies in place. You don't have, if they're taking us to the letter of the law, so to say, it could be that, your administrators, which you have 2 or 3, might be enforced, but is that, you need to ask the insurance company, is that cut it? Do you have endpoint protection on every device? Do you have, clear security controls for how people access the network? Whatever it might be. But I think endpoint management, endpoint detection response, things like that, and MFA.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I guess it's not crazy to me that companies don't have that. I've seen that still, but yeah, interesting.
Right. But when they're coming in fresh, or if they're a non-client that's like, hey, can you help us with this? That's what we say.
That's cool that you work with your clients through that. Yeah, I've been wanting to get someone in that works in the cyber risk industry
Mhm.
and get them in to ask them questions, because I did a huge, I wouldn't say huge, but did a pretty large deep dive into metrics and all the different reports and stuff they've been putting out and how it's changed through time. And it was certainly eye-opening, a lot of stuff I hadn't seen. So I was definitely curious from your take. That's cool that your clients are getting it and you're helping them through that process, helping them mature. That's very cool.
And we don't sell any insurance products at all. We don't even partner with anyone. There's a pretty strict regulation on the way commissions work in that industry. So we're not an insurance provider, nor do we partner with one and get any sort of commission. But we do encourage them to have it. So
Let's see. What's the one more question from them? What do clients care about the most, uptime versus security? Do they care more about operations or do they care more about security?
uptime, 100% operations, and most of the time, the issue with a cybersecurity incident, the most painful issue is the downtime. Right? If you get ransomed, losing your data is huge. That's a big deal. But your plant being down for 2 weeks while you rebuild, or whatever your industry is, that downtime is lost revenue or lost ability to serve your constituents or your community or whatever that might be. And I think that's the primary problem. And then the data is just extra insult to injury, unless the data is your operation. But I think that all ties back to your operation is down. And if you're data heavy, then that is a double whammy.
Do y'all do risk assessments as you're onboarding because you talked about a little bit earlier where you try to figure out what they have going on and what's important to them. Is at least a brief risk assessment? I know those come in all kind of flavors. It can be as big as you want them to be, but is that part of your onboarding process too, to figure out, is this a little bit too risky and we need to lower that risk for them to kind of stay in line with what they're trying to do?
Yeah, oftentimes we have, before we accept a customer, and this has not been an issue that anybody has pushed back on to the point that we weren't able to do business, but there may be mandatory projects to start the relationship. During onboarding, we're going to go ahead and kick off the retirement of this server 2003, God forbid. And we're going to do this exchange migration, and we're going to scope replacement of these Windows 7 laptops and so on and so forth. And if you don't take that, or say if we've accepted that there are some risks, we have 100 machines and there are 7 Windows 7s that run some piece of, or that somebody sits down to do something on this special machine, it's like, okay, well, we got to come up with a solution on that, and you've got to do this, sign this risk acceptance, that this is, we've consulted with you and told you this is the problem, and we got to get around that. But people have to do business, and if they have a real reason they have to do this, and that's how it's got to be, then we'll work on ways to isolate that, or try to work around it.
Often does sitting them down and saying, hey, sign off on this risk, how often does that make them change their mind about accepting it?
So I used to do it a lot in the enterprise, and it was just very formal, very just kind of, this is the deal. I see you've kicked this can down the road, please sign this. And it didn't really ever change the behavior because it was probably operationally necessary. And I think that's probably the main answer, is if it's necessary to the business, then, they're like, I hear you, but that's just the deal. But,
He talks.
yeah, that's right. And it's both ways, is this is a massive risk? Like, if it's massive, then you're talking about your whole company could go under and be bankrupt because of this. That's one that talks huge, but usually it's not that severe, right? It's just a vulnerability that is not ideal that we need to be working on, but maybe we can isolate it in a way that it's like, well, only that goes down. You're like, well, if I replace it, then I'll lose that function right now anyway. So
yeah, definitely tough. Yeah, what else you got, AJ?
I know you said you haven't had any customers that have been breached. Have you onboarded any customers afterwards who have used cyber insurance? Like, who had cyber insurance claims, rather?
I think so, but it was all before we came on board. So we've definitely onboarded people post breach, and I haven't been involved in the claims process. I have anecdotally heard of people being denied, but I think that it's mostly because they did not answer their questionnaires honestly, or at least not it ended up not true at post audit, right? I don't think they were necessarily being dishonest, but they didn't know any better and said, "Oh yeah, of course we're secure." But yeah, we've had some. I know of one that had a claim on wire fraud prior, and they did get some payment, but it did not cover the entire loss. But it helped.
That's what I read. Like it's only covering like 30 or 40% of the actual loss. It's not 100%.
Yeah, I don't know what the fraction was, but that sounds about right.
I think it's changed too, because I remember when it first came out, right, like several years ago, if someone was phished, it would be covered. But I think within the last few years, if you like, it's like willingly or something knowingly, quote unquote, give access, then like sucks to suck. You're not like, you're liable for this, not us. Which I had a question and now I've lost it.
I just want to point out like all the policies are different too. So if you're listening and you're like wondering what's in your policy, just read it, talk to your vendor because you don't know. And the best way to find out is asking or speaking with a professional. I wouldn't say I'm a professional at reviewing these things by any means. Yeah, okay. So none of us are. So actually talk to someone who is, because they can guide you on whether this is going to get you into a bad situation if this particular risk that you're concerned about occurs. Is your policy going to cover you? Those are questions you should be asking when you get your policy.
So I remember my question now, and
You're
I want
welcome.
to ask this for both of you individually. I'm curious what your responses are. With, I guess, a higher prevalence of managed service providers and cyber insurance, so we'll start with you, Tyler. Do you think that there will be a compliance need or legislation or something to that effect where managed services providers are required to have additional testing and, like, for example, annual penetration tests or maybe a third-party review or something to that effect because you have access to additional customers? Do you think something like that would come down, or do you think it'll kind of stay where it is, where every MSP is kind of not the wild west, because I don't think that's a fair assumption, but like, WYRE Technology holds themselves accountable to a very specific set of beliefs and thoughts. And then, like you mentioned before, you've heard of or taken customers from another MSP who might have been compromised and not handled it in the correct way or something. So I'm curious if you think there's something that will come in the near future that would kind of try to put all of these providers onto a single baseline.
I think that it's eventually going to have to happen. I think that as MSPs become the IT department for more critical infrastructure, then there'll be an effect where, we're as an industry a vulnerability for the nation. And so I think that will happen. I think that that's probably 5+ years away. I doubt that that's going to happen during this administration. Just gut feeling right now, as we're looking at repealed regulations. Do I think that there should be potentially some sort of MSP association that is trying to self-regulate and get ourselves up to some sort of standard? Probably. I think that would be a wise decision by the industry. And then anybody that held themselves to that standard, like SOC 2, for instance, right? That's at a certain tier, a certain echelon of tech company, period. SOC 2 compliance is kind of like a stamp saying like, hey, I take security seriously. And so if you're looking to get acquired, you're looking to work with public companies more, especially from an infrastructure perspective. Those kinds of things become important. And so we would go through that for sure. And we open the doors to you all, and we welcome any sort of feedback or security testing that's productive and constructive. And I think that the industry should do the same.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, always happy to answer questions and chat, man. I like the idea of having some sort of like self-regulated compliance for MSPs. I think it's a really good idea. And I hate the idea of having a government regulation, just simply because they don't keep up with the times very well. It's very slow to pivot and move. And the self-regulated ones do a little bit better job of that. So I would say it's more likely that would happen. I would love to see that too, the different levels of it, almost like SOC compliance would be really cool. And it'd be something easy you can show your client to say, hey, look, I'm level whatever. These are the max levels. I'm, level 2 or level 3. and it'd be fantastic. I do think maybe there might be some sort of, sorry, that's my dog if you hear clicky nails on the floor. There may be some sort of government regulation if it comes to government vendors, third parties to the government, like the CMMC, just like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that may get a little bit more broad to nail down that, because it does seem like in general the flow is anything touching government stuff, anything related to critical infrastructure is getting a closer eye now, which it very much well should be. I think if there was to be some sort of conflict, that's the first stuff that's going to go, is anything critical that's keeping the day-to-day life going, anything that can cripple the economy or the people, that's what's going to be targeted. And it's really not that hard. From a hacker's perspective, it's not that hard, people. And so I would love to see people take that more serious and go in and harden a lot of that. That would be great for me to see. But I do think at some point something will come at least for those critical and government related things.
Yep. Agree.
Well, you heard it first. We're going to start the regulation.
We talked about doing that for K through 12, right?
Yeah, we did.
There was an issue locally here where Anthony was really upset, rightfully so, as a security professional about the ability for outside senders to talk to students in our K through 12 schools. At that time, I'm not going to say that it's still this way, but there was a cyberbullying incident where a non-school email address was mass sending to, was it a mailing list or distribution list, something like that, within Google, Google for Education, I guess, and spreading rumors about a child. And it was like, how are we allowing outside email to be mass distributed to students in the school system, right? And it's like, well, because it's kind of the Wild West, right? Like, it's whoever configured that, and did they have the foresight to say, oh, if they know this distribution email, then they can, all students at schoolx.org or whatever .edu. We're like, man, is anybody looking at this? And I think that more people are looking at that now, but that was years ago.
Yeah, that's insane. I'd hate to see that down here. I know you can't email kids directly, but mass mailer like email, don't know about that. That'd be insane.
Yeah. So what made it worse was the school district said there's nothing they could do. And I was like, very simply, block external email addresses. Here's the Google search that you can use for this. Like, I was not too nice, because this was a lawsuit. Unfortunately, this child did not take any like serious choices, as
Good.
Yeah. So her parents pulled her out of school. There was later, I think, sent to another school, and there was a comic book illustration.
What?
Yeah. And it was middle school, of course.
It's the
And
worst. Middle school is the absolute worst.
yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're in middle school, it gets better. But
Sure, many middle schoolers are going to listen to this.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Mine will. No, she's not in middle school anymore, but
yeah, she was roasting me. Anyways, so it was very concerning to see that this was brought up. It wasn't addressed. It happened again. It still wasn't addressed. And like I said, fortunately, this person is still alive to the best of my knowledge. But unfortunately, we see stuff like that happen, and that's not always the case, right? And it starts out as like a joke or something, and then it evolved, and obviously it evolved to being multiple schools. And like Tyler said, it was everyone in the school received these emails. So to sit there and say there's nothing that you can do to protect not only this child, but all the other children, I was like, dude, you should be fired, first off. Second off, like, get help. Like, you could have asked WYRE. You could have asked any other service provider or any other school, like your education. You could have asked the college for help with this issue, but they chose to do nothing instead. And that's what pissed me off.
They need some kind of advisory board or something for schools, I think, of tech companies, tech people, to help them with these different issues, because it's crazy now. There are so many things that kids can use to bully, and bullying was bad back in the day, when just whatever, people picking on you or whatever. But now they can make a YouTube video, put it out there. Snapchat is the big thing now, to just push it out to everyone, and there's so many avenues to increase the viciousness of the bullying. They have to do something. They have to. There's got to be better ways of going about protecting kids, because they're really at that critical state that they need a little bit of help from parents and adults and people they look up to. Yeah, way to end on a depressing note, bro.
We have to look forward to it in cyber. You gonna plug all the vulnerabilities? Do you think
I wish.
with AI, is it going to self-learn and reduce vulnerabilities, or is it going to be polymorphic and be used by attackers more? Which one, attackers or defenders?
The
Both.
Matrix. Going to turn into the Matrix and take over the world, and we're all going to become test tube babies and batteries, and that's just how it's going to be, man.
All right, I'm out on that one.
So there was I don't remember how connected she was, but one of the ladies that had to do with the Matrix said that
Yeah, I should bring this up again.
yeah, because it's a cool story, dude. Basically, the Matrix was the precursor to Terminator.
And there it's sinking in, watching it. Go ahead, let it cook. You start thinking of the implication, like, interesting.
Yeah, man, scary stuff. But to answer your question, I think both, right? Because it's just like this might be an awful comparison for some, but like, to me, it's similar to a pit bull, right? Like, a lot of people are scared of pit bulls, but realistically, it's their upbringing that determines the nature of the dog. So similar to a model, an AI model or language or generative, whatever it might be, if you train it on malicious data and to provide malicious output, it'll obviously be used maliciously. Whereas if you train it for defensive capabilities, it'll be used for defensive capabilities. Now, I don't think it'll get, well, at least not yet. I don't think it'll get to the point where it kind of like meets each other and they're like, they fight back and forth and they're like, actually, it's us versus the humans. And then, something like that occurs. But this, again, AI has been around since the 60s, something like that. Like, it's way older than the last 5 years. So
Hey, look at War Game,
yeah, good movie too.
I was going to say, you gave me a really good idea to do something with the way they're doing with agents now, and building like a couple of defensive and a couple of offensive agents, and then you could feed the defensive ones the stuff from your organization, and then have them just go at it, like, because that's what they're doing with agents. You have ChatGPT, just one thing, but now you can have a bunch of agents that are just working together. And they could probably come up with some really cool stuff just going back and forth like that, passing each other information. Because that's one of the solutions that they've been considering for the problem where models hallucinate, having multiple layers of agents that fact check each other along the way of producing the output for the user. So that'd be a really interesting scenario to do. I've used them for both.
I not security specific, but I think that agents are going to be super interesting for the IT space, the traditional IT space, because when you have a knowledge base that's really well fleshed out, or if you even have a knowledge base that's dynamically growing and learning based on the actions of the users or the technicians, the engineers, whatever, if it's looking over their shoulder and building knowledge base articles and processes, and then a different agent is then following those processes, it's going to be, once computer usage is like really well dialed in for agents, I think that having an agent that lives inside the ticketing system and their own monitoring and management system, and has access to the knowledge base and has access to creds and has the ability to call on a human for access and say, hey, can I get into 365 and add this user? It's like, sure, and it's handling it. I don't think we're that far off that. I don't know, to some listeners and maybe to you, it could sound a little far fetched even, but I think that it's coming maybe even in the next 2 years, like, to actual adoption and functionality. Maybe the percentage is not 100% or even 95% success, but as long as it could fail gracefully, I could see password resets and user creation and very simple, like, here, this is how this works. Just get after it. And maybe to your point about error correction, maybe that threshold of usefulness, like 90% success rate, for instance, might be because you've got 3 that are as a team going, all right, is this right? Seem right to you? Okay, good. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I checked this. Did you check that? So yes, I did. It's an exciting future. It's going to be really fun.
Yeah, I think I think we'll probably start seeing some stuff coming out in the next 2 years, and we'll see bigger adoption in the next 5 or so, where a lot of these mundane tasks that people don't like to do are going to be covered with these. I mean, we're already seeing it with a lot of with chat and support things with, like, say, Amazon or whatever. That's almost all AI driven now. And they're just trained on whatever the policies are. Okay, he said this thing, we'll just give him a refund. Boom, done, moving on. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. And some people are scared. It is going to replace some jobs. It's going to allow you to be more efficient with the people you have. That is true. But it's going to be, to me, I look at it as a workforce augmentation tool. It's going to make us better and faster than we are without it. I use it. I was talking about on the last podcast. That is soon to be released. I use it for coding. I can code probably 4 or 5 times faster than I could before.
I was using like right before this.
Oh, were you? Yeah, I mean, it's insane. Like, I can build quality apps, but if I didn't have my coding background, I could not move that fast because it would be busted and broken because it doesn't give me perfect code every time. I modify it and I can imagine what I need it to do and I can force it into that structure and make the changes I need to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still making me so much faster because it's doing the bulk of it, looking up the functions, or I can explain why it chose this style or this functionality. Yeah, but it's cool. I'm definitely looking forward to it and seeing it. But what I was saying too was I've used it on both sides. I tried to do a hack the box challenge. I think it was last year or the year before with ChatGPT, and it sucked. It was hallucinating switches for my different commands. It was a cluster. It just didn't work. Same with some of the blue team stuff. It would make up commands for different tools I was going to be using. I haven't used it to try to translate to like different like Stigma or Stix formats for if you're doing detections or something like that. But I would imagine it would do it pretty well though.
Can you say that first word again?
Is it Stigma or Sigma? What is it?
Sigma. There's no T.
I'm thinking of Stig, and
Yes.
I put two together. Bro, it's almost 10 o'clock at night. Leave me alone.
No,
Tyler's about to die on us.
That's going in a short.
My brain's not working.
I'm good on this.
Yeah, we can make fun of me this go around. Usually it's you.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna make fun of me for the word list anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's all good. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, I've seen a lot of usability, and it's just been getting better and better every year. So I'm excited.
So last AI topic, I just want to ask, have you played with any of these things? So I've been using ChatGPT for a long time, or pretty much since it came out, and stay pretty current with everything, all this functionality. But I haven't used Gemini much, but I have been using the deep research model that got released to do some industry research, and also a Notebook LM. Have you used that before?
I haven't even heard of that one.
This is magic. So I'm going to send you a link. And after this podcast, you should check it out. So I just uploaded a PDF that it was like this first draft business plan that we had in 2021. And I was like, oh, I just have this handy. It's pretty long. So uploaded it into Notebook LM, which is a Gemini product, and it will make a podcast. So it has 2 hosts and it talks back and forth about the content. It's 30 minutes long. What? And there's this beta feature that I was using where you can hit join and you can join the call. And so they were pronouncing WYRE wrong. It was like, hey, we're here today to talk about this company, WYRE Technology. I was like, oh, let me correct you. So I hit the button, I joined the thing, and these 2 chatbots are like, hey, we've got a listener here with us. What can we do for you? And I'm like, hey, sorry, you're just I know it looks like WYRE because it's all caps or whatever. Which, side story, it doesn't mean anything. It just looked good capitalized. I was like, but it's actually WYRE. And they're like, oh, thanks for the clarification. And they just went on with their business and started pronouncing it right. It's like, What sort of madness is this? So it's crazy.
So, Mike, you might not have used it, but you've heard it because Lavezzo, the ship poster, made the podcast about me using this. He made the podcast, like the 3 or 5 minute podcast about me using that.
It's crazy. Like, even the videos you ask it to produce now based off of some prompt, just incredible. It's so like all those imperfections we used to be able to use to be like, okay, yeah, this is fake. They're slowly dissipating like every year until you just can't even tell. It's insane.
What's funny is I was watching YouTube earlier and I got an ad for crypto.com. and the ad itself was AI. Like I could kind of tell in the coloring that they used and like the way the people were moving. It was like a family on a beach, and it was very blue and very orange, and like there was no there were no lines like between the fingers or stuff like that. Like it just moved just a little bit off, and I was like, really? Come on, guys, you have money, you could hire people for this, but it makes sense. Tyler, I'm actually curious, and Mike and I were talking about this earlier, I think. With all of your support asks and stuff, do you guys incorporate an LLM, like a large language model for those people who might not know what that is?
Um, we don't yet, but one of our products is actively got it in the pipeline. So we use a tool to intake customer requests via Slack, Teams, and its own native instant messenger. So instead of being in this old clunky ticketing system where they have to pretty much just email back and forth to users, our staff can use it. It's like Slack. So that tool has a AI or an LLM that parses the request and categorizes it. And so it can automatically forward to the correct team. So like, hey, the network is down, networking team. Got it. Hey, the server is down, just to keep it simple, right? Okay, server team. So it does that. But in their pipeline, they're going to integrate like a live assistant, an agent that is going to be in that tool triaging tickets. I mean, this is coming. And then I think that all the ticketing vendors, it would blow my mind if they don't have 100 devs working on that right now.
Yeah, a lot of people are moving that way. I mean, I've been looking at building some augmentation for our pen testing workflow I talked about it a little bit, using RAG, where you can feed it your updated scans and whatever you're doing, and it can pull and create suggestions based off of the data that's coming in from your activities.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many use cases. I mean, it's unlimitless. Just thinking about how to improve your day to day in whatever role you're in. It's insane.
Yeah. And I think that individuals, not just business owners, not just entrepreneurs, but everybody should be thinking about, how do I work with this tool in my day-to-day life, whether that's work or home or hobbies or whatever, because you said it earlier, it's just an augmentation of our existing workforce and our existing resources. And you'd be crazy not to use a stone as a hammer once you saw the first of our ancestors pick up that stone and be able to do something you couldn't do. It's like, pick up that stone, man, use those tools. That's what makes humans what we are, right? Is the use of tools. So when a new one comes around, it may be concerning, but I think that if you don't learn to use it early, then you'll be behind. And that goes for whatever profession, any profession.
Yeah. So stop resisting, let the machines win.
It's not, and I think you definitely can take it to the natural extreme of utopian or dystopian. But I think that living into this moment, this day, I'm not developing AI tools, and I don't have any influence on whether it happens or it doesn't happen, or we hit AGI or some super intelligent version of this, or we don't. So, regardless of the opinion, I think the world we live in is that we have this neat tool, and just going to kind of use it. And if it becomes my overlord one day, I did not contribute to that, but I did help. It did help me write some stuff.
Let's get Mike.
I think that's it, man. I think we can wrap this one. Yeah, thanks for hanging on for 2 hours and some change. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
It's fun.
It's a pleasure talking.
We'll have you back on. Maybe we'll have Mike Wade at some point.
That I want that bad. He's got some amazing stories that we just got to get him loose. Maybe I'll bring bourbon or something. But
hey. Yeah.
I want those on the record. I want them recorded somewhere. So this is great for him.
Yeah. If he's a bourbon man, I'll send some bourbon special order over that way for y'all.
All right.
Just let me know what he likes. I'll send it. Cool. Well, wrap us up, Mr. AJ, our conclusion man.
So in today's summary, we've discussed a little bit about Tyler here with WYRE Technology and what a managed service provider is, some of the services that they provide. We discussed some common issues and basically what Mike as a penetration tester might focus on for a client of an MSP or actually targeting an MSP themselves. We busted a few myths, or maybe validated one myth as far as whether or not smaller businesses view security as a cost center or an investment, and do they care about security or uptime. And then last but not least, we also got to discuss a little bit about AI, a great topic on this podcast. We should probably learn how to do stuff with it, and some of the potential use cases for MSPs, small managed businesses, or individuals themselves. If you have any questions, we will have some links down below in the description for WYRE Technology, as well as some articles that we reference. And that's it for me.
All right. Thanks, AJ. Thanks, Tyler. That's it for us here on C-Suite Cyber. Next time.
Yay.